Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Heather Teague? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Heather Teague was born on April 25, 1972, and raised in Henderson County, Kentucky, which is just south of Evansville, Indiana. Heather was described as a good student, intelligent, outgoing, and friendly. She was involved in a number of activities in school, including cheerleading. She had a few potential careers that she was interested in, including being a physician, nurse, or politician. So at least she had two good ideas. After graduating from high school, she attended Western Kentucky University. She ended up dropping out of college due to substance use. She returned home and started working in a factory. Heather was not happy with her job. She wanted to return to college someday, but she could not discontinue her substance use. Her life was spiraling out of control. In the summer of 1995, Heather was moving from house to house, and her belongings were in her vehicle. In early August, she was reported missing, but the police found her. She told them she was just running around. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On August 26, 1995, 23-year-old Heather made her way to Newburgh Beach, which is in Spotsville, Kentucky, right across the Ohio River from the town of Newburgh, Indiana. So it's named Newburgh Beach, even though it's technically not in Newburgh. Many of the people who go to that beach are from Indiana. They cross the river into Kentucky to get to the beach. After arriving at the beach, Heather started sunbathing. She was alone at one end of the beach. Across the Ohio River in Newburgh, Indiana, a man named Tim was watching Heather through the front window of his house. Tim was using a telescope. It's not exactly clear what he was doing. One report indicated that he was bird watching and just happened to see Heather. I think it would be reasonable to believe that there were no birds involved in this situation, but either way, he had a telescope and a clear view of Heather. At about 12:45 p.m., Tim saw a man come out of the woods not far from where Heather was sunbathing and approach her on the beach. The man was wearing a wig, a mosquito net, and jeans, but not wearing a shirt. Tim said that the man put his arm on Heather's back and appeared to be saying something to her. The man was holding what appeared to be a pistol. At this point, the man grabbed Heather by her hair and dragged her into the woods. Heather grabbed a towel as she was being dragged in order to cover herself. Tim called 911, but he was connected to emergency service in Indiana because that's where he was. The kidnapping had occurred in Kentucky, where the imaginary birds were. Tim called the Kentucky State Police a few minutes later. The police in Kentucky responded and searched the beach. They found Heather's lounge chair and the top part of her bathing suit. In the woods, they found the bottom part of her bathing suit and her towel. Her vehicle was also found nearby. The police did not find Heather. Around the same time Heather was abducted, a man was recording video on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River near Newburgh Beach. The man had been hired by a farmer who was upset because people kept driving through the farm fields and damaging the crops. The farmer had instructed the man to record the damage and any vehicles in the area. The man with the camera captured Heather's vehicle. There was a tarp on the ground next to her vehicle. The driver's side door was open, and the rear hatch was open. The man had also video recorded a red and white Ford Bronco driving toward the beach where Heather had been kidnapped. It had a chrome luggage rack on the roof. The driver of the vehicle appears to be a man, but the image of him is very blurry in the video. Tim, the man who had the telescope exclusively for watching birds, helped the police draw a sketch of the kidnapper. He said that the man was about 6 feet tall, just over 200 pounds, and had a bushy brown beard. The police started searching for the kidnapper and the red and white Ford Bronco. They asked the public for help. The driver of the Bronco never came forward, which the police found to be suspicious. Why wouldn't the man just say that the vehicle was his? Perhaps he was involved in the crime. A second witness came forward to the police. She gave the police a story about seeing a woman struggling with a man in a red Chevette, a vehicle which is completely different than a Ford Bronco. These two vehicles could never be confused with one another. The police eventually received a tip about a 30-year-old man named Marvin Ray Dill, who owned a red and white Ford Bronco with a chrome luggage rack on the roof. Marvin's mugshot, which had been taken sometime earlier, looked a lot like the person that Tim had described. Marvin was well known to law enforcement. He had been arrested a few years earlier after repeatedly calling a woman and asking to talk to her boyfriend who had died. He pleaded guilty to harassment in that case. Marvin had been pulled over in Evansville, Indiana in February 1995 for approaching young girls. In his Ford Bronco, the police found marijuana, 2 guns, 2 knives, duct tape, rubber gloves, and rope. He was arrested on charges related to substances and firearms. The police went to Marvin's trailer and encountered his wife, but Marvin was not there. They spoke to his wife about Heather's disappearance. She thought that Marvin's hair was shorter than what Tim described. So she was saying that the person the police were looking for may not have been Marvin. The police were later notified by someone identifying themselves as the attorney for Marvin's wife. The attorney was concerned for Marvin's safety. Marvin's wife had told the attorney that when Marvin came home to the trailer, he was upset and told her to get out of the trailer. Marvin's wife also told the attorney that Marvin had hidden the Ford Bronco in the woods behind the trailer. The police were able to obtain a search warrant for Marvin's trailer. On September 1, 1995, just after 1 a.m., the police approached the trailer to serve the search warrant. Marvin told his wife to exit the trailer before bringing an end to his own life with a firearm. The police found Marvin's red and white Ford Bronco hidden on his property. There was blood on the tailgate, and inside the vehicle there was hair that was similar to Heather's, although it doesn't appear as though these items were ever connected to Heather. It seemed like this was an open and shut case, but some people were not certain that Marvin acted alone in the homicide. The police became interested in another potential suspect, a truck driver named Christopher John Below. Christopher was the suspect in another disappearance, a woman who had disappeared in 1991 and looked similar to Heather. He pleaded guilty to attempted involuntary manslaughter in that case and was sentenced to 11 to 18 years in prison. Christopher was also suspected in many other disappearances of young women. He was in the area at the time of Heather's disappearance and left the state shortly afterward. He may have known Marvin as well, but it's not clear. Christopher was described as somebody who was violent and highly sexually motivated. He denied any involvement in Heather's disappearance. Now moving to my analysis. There are many theories about what happened in the case of Heather Teague, which is somewhat surprising given the evidence in this case. Let's take a look at the major theories in this case and the evidence both for and against those theories. First, I'll look at the theory that Marvin Dill was responsible for Heather's murder, and he worked alone. Looking at the evidence that supports this theory, Marvin Dill was a career criminal who had been convicted of harassing women. His vehicle contained items which might be found in a kidnapper's starter kit. He drove a red and white Ford Bronco with a chrome luggage rack, just like the one video recorded near the scene of the kidnapping. The man with the telescope, Tim, thought the man that he saw was Marvin. If for some reason Marvin and Christopher were working together, that would mean that Christopher was driving Marvin's vehicle as Marvin abducted Heather on the beach. This doesn't make a lot of sense. Why wouldn't Marvin just drive his own vehicle? Marvin started acting erratically after finding out the police were asking questions about him. He decided to make an exit from this life rather than interact with them. Marvin wasn't known to commit crimes with conspirators. He operated alone. If Christopher was actually a serial killer, as some suspect, he would probably have operated alone as well. Moving to the evidence that contradicts this theory, Christopher seems like a reasonably good potential suspect. Just like Marvin, he fit the description offered by the witness with the telescope. Marvin's wife thought that Marvin's hair was too short to be the person the witness described. Marvin was in jail 2 weeks before the kidnapping. His hair appeared to be short at that time. The perpetrator was wearing a wig during the attack, which means it could have been just about anybody. When considering the evidence regarding this theory, I think it's more likely that Marvin murdered Heather and that he was acting alone. There's really not much evidence supporting this idea that Christopher was involved. There are other theories in addition to the ones involving Marvin and Christopher. Let's take a look at those theories now. One theory says that Heather was murdered by organized crime figures. I'm not aware of any evidence that supports this theory. Heather may have been involved with drugs and had an erratic lifestyle, but those are not compelling reasons to be targeted by a gang. Even if for some reason they did want to kill her, they would probably have just shot her on the beach instead of dragging her into the woods. Another theory is that Heather staged her own disappearance so she could start a new life. This theory is also not well supported. If this is what happened, it would mean that Heather somehow knew that some guy in a house across the river would be looking at her with a telescope when she was on the beach. She had a friend of hers put on a wig and pretend to kidnap her. After this, she started a new life. This has to be the most exhausting, intricate, and convoluted way for a person to disappear. There was no need for all the theater. She could have simply left anytime she wanted. She was essentially living out of her car already. I would say this, however, if she wanted people to believe she was dead, staging the scene in this way was very effective at convincing people. It would have been the perfect disappearance. There is almost no one out there who believes that Heather is still alive. Moving to the next question, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Marvin Dill was a career criminal with pronounced antisocial tendencies. He was highly interested in committing offenses against women and was actively looking for a victim. While driving in Newburgh Beach, Marvin noticed Heather's vehicle. He decided to stop in order to target the vehicle's owner, or maybe he initially simply intended to steal whatever was in the vehicle. After investigating, Marvin saw Heather on the beach and decided to kidnap and kill her. He thought that other people might be looking at Heather as well. Perhaps Tim the telescope man would frame this story a little differently, like Marvin was thinking to himself, wow, there are a lot of birds around here. Someone might be looking at those birds and accidentally see Heather. Either way, Marvin was worried about being detected. Therefore, he went back to his vehicle and put on a disguise. At this point, Marvin kidnapped Heather and took her to a remote area. In this area of Kentucky, there are many places where Marvin could have gone and remained undetected. Marvin committed various offenses before killing Heather and burying her body someplace it would never be found. He believed he could get away with the crime, but his vehicle was captured on video. This is something that was very unlikely back in 1995, especially in the area where he was. When Marvin realized that the authorities were closing in, he decided that he did not want to return to prison. Therefore, he permanently excluded that possibility. I think this was a crime of opportunity. Heather probably felt safe on the beach. Few people in her situation would expect that a man would come running out of the woods onto the beach in broad daylight and commit a kidnapping. This case seemed like it was pretty much open and shut. However, many people felt unsatisfied with the way Marvin escaped justice. One could argue that Marvin didn't really escape justice, but I think that family members, friends, and law enforcement wanted to hold Marvin accountable through the justice system. In an effort to obtain traditional justice, numerous unlikely theories were generated and pursued. Perhaps one of these theories is true. For example, maybe Christopher was somehow involved, but there is no convincing evidence for any other theory outside the one involving Marvin being guilty and acting alone. I don't think that people like it when a criminal gets to decide the terms of how an investigation ends, and that's exactly what Marvin did in this case. Those are my thoughts in the case of Heather Teague. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.